All right, good morning and welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. And I told you guys, it'll be the elephants at the finals of the AFCON tournament. And yes, Ivory Coast, the hosts, finally made it to the finals. They will now be facing the Super Eagles of Nigeria. And that's how we start this edition of Morning Cafe. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. How hot is the coffee where you are?
Oh yes, mysteriously again, Ivory Coast is sailing through. The finals are going to be interesting, playing with Nigeria.
Yes.
Anyway, karibu sana. This is Morning Cafe. I'm usually Stanley Nyeringeti. It's a Thursday, that one day that you give you advice. Kama uko na mpoa, relax. We'll be giving you advice on how to better your relationship. Kama hauna, also relax. We'll be giving you advice on how to tafuta a very good mpoa.
And
right here.
Become an expert now, eh?
Sorry?
You're becoming an expert on
Oh yes. Lakini bado sina. all this kind of advice that I get here na bado. Bado. Karibu sana. This is how we're going to be serving you the whole breakfast, and just starting off, changing the whole kind of set and getting into some Kenyan papers.
Yes, just a quick look, run through the dailies this morning. States e-citizen school fees blow. That's a big headline on the Daily Nation today, and we'll be looking at more details on that. Also, the Standard e-citizen school fees blow for Defiant Ruto. You see, it's the same thing, theme over and over. On the People Daily, CBK prepare for expensive food prices. Wow. Taifa leo, bima mpya ya afya ni sumu. It's according to COG. Those are the main headlines we'll be looking at later on. Can we get the weather?
Oh yes, let me try and let's have the weather and see what to expect. Right, my Jiggy Majugi is misbehaving. We'll be getting into the weather in a few, but meanwhile, you can take a look at the highlights and see what to expect. And first off, Interior Cabinet Secretary Ricky Kindiki was the most traveled CS in 2023 with 192 documented trips within Kenya, according to the latest findings by pollsters TIFA.
The number of people who have died after consuming illicit liquor in Kirinyaga County rises to 13 after 7 more succumb while being treated in hospital. And it is the Eagles versus the Elephants for the AFCON finals as hosts Ivory Coast beat DR Congo to set up a final meeting with Nigeria, which earlier saw off South Africa through a penalty shootout.
Right, let's take a look at the weather as well as the traffic, and just a few of the roads that you should be avoiding as you wake up early in the morning. This particular roundabout, just before you hit the Valley Road, there's a slight traffic snarl-up before you actually hit the Raila Odinga Way. Let's see other roads that you should be avoiding right about now. Well, the majority of the roads are looking as clear as possible. Just before you hit Timol, that roundabout, slight traffic snarl-up has started right now. Other roads, before you hit the Wilson Business Park and the whole Langata Road as well, there is a traffic snarl-up right now. Around Nairobi metropolitan region, this is the weather that is right now 17 degrees Celsius, and promises to get as hot as 26 degrees Celsius. It might, chances of it raining in the evening are about 50% there, and that's how the weather might be looking like around the Nairobi metropolitan region. We'll be getting into now the papers in a few as we have that load now. Let's take a look at the diary for you this morning. And on our news diary, first off, it is perhaps for magical Kenya Ladies Open. Fred, you know, they call golf the game of kings and queens. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. and the much awaited. Now, this is going to be the fourth kind of edition since 2019, 2020, all the ways. The past 3 years, there has been this amazing golf game, and now we're going to have it as well for this particular year, happening at Vipingo Ridge in Kilifi County from today all the way to the 11th for the fourth edition of the tournament. And this event will serve as the season opener for the 2024 Ladies European Tour LET calendar. And from that, today is the second last day of the National Youth Service, NOS, which began on Monday. So the exercise targets 15,000 servicemen and women and will be ward-based, where they have allocated recruits per ward while considering the population of each ward. So according to the CS Public Service, that is Moses Kuria, the recruits will be given priority upon their graduation when it comes to absorption in the National Police Service and Kenya Defence Forces. And away from that, an itinerary of another Cabinet Secretary, now that one is for Labour and Social Protection, that is Florence Bore, will be leading a Kenyan delegation during the United Nations 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development, which is underway at the United Nations offices in New York. Matters Counties and Matters Film now, as we flip the page with you, the Kitale Film Week, and today is the 5th day of this event, which is happening in Trans Nzoia County, and it is themed Experience Difference. It's an 8-day film festival aiming to position film as a strategic factor to sustainable development, and specifically in that county. Away from and across the borders, so today the International Criminal Court, ICC, will hold a ceremony at the seat of the court in The Hague, that is the Netherlands, to welcome the Republic of Romania as the 124th state party to the Rome Statute, the ICC's founding treaty. So the ceremony will gather high-level representatives of the government of Armenia, ICC Trust Fund for Victims of Assembly of States Parties and of state parties. So basically, Armenia will be joining the Rome Statute. And real quick, on today in history, back in 2017, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, a US-educated former prime minister, was sworn in as Somalia's new president on the 8th of February 2017, after lawmakers gave him an unassailable lead in the second round of an election in Mogadishu. And in 2007, the International Criminal Court on Saturday said it would not charge Darfur rebel chief Bahar Idris Abu Ghada over the killing of 12 African Union peacekeepers in 2007. And that is the news diary for you, as well as today in history. Kama kawaida will be updating this news diary to the tail end of the show. I'm just telling you what to expect in our bulletins this morning. Tuingie kwenye magazetini sasa.
Sawa sawa. E-Citizen school fees blow for defiant Ruto. That's a big headline on the Standard this morning. It is a court shocker. Judge slams the brakes on payment of school fees through E-Citizen pay bill number 22222, dealing the president's plan to collapse over 3,000 government pay channels into a single digital system a blow, even as the head of state vows, while in Japan, that his program is unstoppable. The full story is on page 2. And yes, Standard have actually flashed that pay bill number. And, you know, you can recognize the green, white, and red. It is so prominent on the front page. That's a single government pay channel, at least for mobile payments. 22222. Other highlights, okay, fine. Let me just give it some focus, kidogo, because we have the president and what he said. He said, you may have heard the latest about school fees in Kenya. Some of the money paid by parents in boarding schools, we are insisting that it be paid through e-Citizen. The cash payment system is slippery and often an avenue for corruption. Technology will help us eliminate this. That's the president's argument for his insistence on this single payment channel for all government services. Away from that, other highlights. The other big story on the front page, Ministry TSC fight for control of teachers. It's on the bottom strip. The battle for leverage over 364,000 teachers played out after the Education Ministry snubbed a meeting called by the teachers' employer to review the TSC Act. Stories on page 10. Other highlights on the bottom strip of the Standard. Wild beater targets under 2-hour marathon, that is in sports. In other news, cheap loans, they ask, forget it after CBK hikes rate. Kenya Kwanza's rosy promise of cheaper loans for hustlers is now up in smoke thanks to the Central Bank of Kenya's decision to raise its benchmark lending rate. Let's now move on to the top strip of the Standard for more highlights. And you have one on the continuing debate on IEBC recruitment. They now call it a clash as panel moves to pick bosses. Now, a decision by the Electoral Commission selection panel to proceed and recruit new commissioners following a court order sets the stage for a clash with the opposition after Azimio leader Raila Odinga dared the government to fill the posts and face a backlash, including return of mass protests. Interesting. The only other highlight on the front page is matters to do with succession. What Amario's kin girlfriend got from 760 million estate. This is a gentleman whose name was Fai Amario, and he had a big brewery somewhere in Naivasha back in the early years when Stan was still not yet a concept. On the back page, matters sports. Kelvin Kiptum, the world record holder, seeking to deep under 2 hours competitive. So, right, that's the Standard this morning.
Matters this Citizen also focused on the Daily Nation, and they call it a setback. And the High Court has suspended the Education Ministry's directive that fees for national schools and other levies like university cafeteria charges be paid through the eCitizen platform. On a day, President Ruto defended payments to one government pay bill number. It adds to controversial state policies halted through public interest suits. More is on pages 6 and 7. And they also call it a crisis, where the government also fighting in courts to salvage housing and health levies. On the bottom scroll, the favored and the forgotten. The cabinet secretaries with the most local tours. After the report and findings by pollster Tifa. Just a brief context of that, cabinet secretaries have toured 4 regions: Rift Valley, Coast, Eastern and Central, 4 times more than they have Nyanza, Western and Northeastern, according to a survey that reviewed the activities of the state officers. And they have pictured the state officers with the most local tours there. Prime CS Musalia Mudavadi, Kithure Kindiki, Interior CS, Health CS Susan Akumicha, Water CS Zakaria Njeru, and Labour and Social Protection, that is Florence Borre. On the right are the highlights. Half of Kenyans in debt crisis without a pay rise in 5 years. And Killer Brew. Kirinyaga toxic drink death toll rises to, it's actually now 13.
Yes, that has gone up to 13 now.
Yes. And Labor of Love, mother who carries disabled son to studio. Budding musician who's 26 has been unable to walk on his own since childhood and depends on his mother, who is determined to see him achieve his dream. Good luck to him. That is just among of the highlights focused on the front page. On the back page, 3 more highlights on this paper. Number 1, external public debt up 450 billion in 5 months. This external debt stock stood at 5.89 trillion Kenyan shillings by the end of November, up from 5.4 trillion Kenyan shillings in July. And 54.2% is the debt that constituted external debts as of November last year, according to data from Central Bank of Kenya. Speaking of banks, on the right, World Bank lines up 240 billion in new funding to Kenya. And at the very top scroll, matters sports and matters football. End of the road, they ask. Football Kenya Federation President Nick Mwendwa is not eligible, quote unquote, to vie in upcoming national polls. on page 38. The ghosts of Football Kenya Federation continue haunting it. That is the Daily Nation for you.
All right, let's focus on the Business Daily. And I think the Business Daily today has the most interesting headlines. The main one being half of Kenyans financially stressed as pay shrinks 25%. Workers earning less than 20,000 shillings a month are the most stressed. Real wages have been eroded by 25% since 2019. Now it says nearly half of Kenyans are in dire financial distress amidst income stagnation and shrinking payslips since 2019 that have pushed them into a debt trap. This is according to a new survey. It's the Financial Services Monitor by Old Mutual Group reveals that 48% of Kenyans, or about 9.5 million, in both formal and informal employment currently feel overwhelmed or highly stressed by their financial situation. Are you among those? Elsewhere, still on the front page of the Business Daily, and this is another interesting one, hustlers to pay 3,000 shillings rent daily for city roadside structures. Now they say that owners of temporary structures on road reserves in Kenyan cities will be required to pay a minimum fee of 3,000 shillings daily. That means if you've put up a small garage temporarily on the roadside, or a small kiosk, or any structure on a road reserve that you say, okay, fine, I'm not here permanently, but I'll put my business here for until they decide to build the road. Once you do that, now you'll be required to pay 3,000 shillings daily.
Wow.
And Kenyans who will also be expected to pay a one-off fee of 50,000 shillings to be allowed to direct stormwater into public road drainages.
What?
This is interesting. The other charges, this is a draft Kenya Roads Regulations 2023. Access to private premises, you have to pay between 10,000 to 50,000. If at all you touch on the road reserves. Access to petrol stations, you know you have to move from the main road to a petrol station.
Yeah.
That access alone, you have to pay for it as the owner of the petrol station. Between 150,000 and 200,000. And other people who will be affected, owners of malls, access roads into malls. They also have to pay between 150,000 and 300,000.
And now the people who would be feeling the pinch, private business long-term lease on road reserve.
Yes.
Now the long-term.
I think the most interesting is directing drain water to road drainage. If your property is next to the road and the drainage on the road has already been set, for you to direct water from your property to go to that drainage, let's say there's so much rain, you have to pay 50,000 shillings. Interesting.
So
Other highlights.
You're basically paying for geographical and nature.
Things that are beyond.
Yes.
Anyway,
beyond nature.
These are the proposals in that regulation. The highlights on the ticker on the front page of the Business Daily. Ruto strikes 99 billion shilling car assembly deals while he's in his trip to Japan. Elsewhere, Safaricom parent Vodacom faces 170 billion shilling bill in suit. And this is an interesting one. A South African could receive up to the equivalent of 170 billion shillings from Safaricom's parent company Vodacom as compensation for his innovation of the Please Call Me feature.
Yeah.
That service, actually someone invented it. They've been using it for years. Now the court in South Africa has told them, well, just pay that guy 170 billion Kenya shillings.
Wow.
And also the Communications Authority in a fresh bid to curb counterfeit phones. Those are the highlights on the front page of the Business Daily today. Very interesting headlines on the Business Daily.
The one for Japan reminds me of Kenyans on social media saying that probably they should have talked to Stella in Japan and made sure that Freshly Mwamburi...
Oh, Stella is supposed to come mwezi wa tano.
Yes.
Tarehe 17 mwezi wa tano, yes, in May.
Yes, so they have ensured that Stella will actually come back, and because she has a medical degree there, she'll actually come back and Freshly Mwamburi will be happy.
And works in the counties.
Yes.
Okay.
You remember that song?
Oh, yeah. Ilikuwa tarehe 17 mwezi wa tano.
Oh, Stella wangu. From Matters Stella to the Star. Mystery 6 billion Kenyan shillings spent in Uhuru last office days is a big story on the Star. And they continue to say, auditor unable to ascertain whether money actually spent to buy shares on pages 4 and 5. So it is matters, they call it irregular. Top officials splurged billions to buy shares in 2 banks. And at the very bottom, have villagers torch illicit premises as death toll hits 13. That is what the scattered bottles there outside the premises that was burnt down by residents after 13 people died. The Star has quoted it correctly. The death toll so far. Remember, we'll be updating you on this particular story as of today and just saying what the latest numbers will be. On the left, more highlights. Still in Japan, Kenya signs deal with Toyota for local plant. On page 6, they have the photo there of the president, William Ruto, and Toyota Tsusho president, Ichiro Kashitani, when he visited the factory in Nagoya, Japan. Just below that, KMA, that is the Kenya Maritime Authority, under fire for paying MPs millions. And Auditor General Nancy Gathungu has questioned the spending of about 50 million at KMA, part of which was used to entertain MPs, and they're calling it 19,000 Kenyan shillings per day. Mm-hmm. And this is just a position of what we're seeing on, was it the Standard, showing how Kenyans who are earning 20,000 Kenyan shillings and less are really, really stressed.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, well, the legislators...
It's actually on the front page of the Business Daily.
Yes, the front page of the Business Daily. And yet the legislators who get that salary, someone's monthly salary on just that one day.
Oh, yeah.
Just for entertainment.
This life, no balance.
And finally, matters, another highlight on the left, matters education. They say tough laws. The Teacher Service Commission wants untrained and unregistered teachers locked out of classrooms. A proposed law makes it an offense for school boards of management or head teachers to engage unrelated persons in the schools of jurisdiction. And finally, at the very top scroll, TIFA survey, Europe preferred destination for Ruto ministers, new poll shows. They have pictured the tourism cabinet secretary, Alfred Mutuo, there. That is the Star for you this morning.
On the People Daily, if at all you thought that times were hard, well, times are going to get harder. The central bank says prepare for expensive key food prices. It is a warning that cost of living is set to rise in the next 3 months due to high import values and exchange rate depreciation. And this is from the central bank governor himself, Kariuki Thuge. The main story is on page 4. But yes, in the next 3 months, prepare for higher food prices. What that will mean exactly, you can see if you just compare it to the headline of the Business Daily, that half of Kenyans are already financially stressed. Mm-hmm. Their pay has already shrunk 25%. You look at your pay slip and cry. And you're being told 3 months from now, things will be tougher. So brace yourself. And the highlights on the front page, how DPP helped Sonko get off the hook in 357 million shilling corruption case, and why teachers oppose new TSC mandate. Those are just some of the highlights on the front page of the People Daily, but on the top strip of the same page, I think one of the biggest talking points today, another blow as court holds Ruto's school fee payment system. Story has been covered extensively on page 2 of the People Daily.
Right.
You're Hali.
I was taking a look at the Sonko and how he drove into Milimani courts, flashy and all that, just to...
You'd think he knew...
be acquitted.
He knew...
he knew his
what
fate.
To expect. No, let's just say he was optimistic. He was optimistic.
Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa leo sasa. Bima mpya afya ni sumu, ni kulingana na magavana COG, mwenyekiti wa baraza la magavana nchini, COG Anne Waiguru, ambaye pia ni gavana wa Kirinyaga, akihutubia wanahabari pale, na wamesema magavana wapinga sheria inayolazimisha raia kutii masharti fulani ndipo watibiwe. Kwingineko, koti ya piga breki eCitizen wanasema mahakama kuu imesimamisha kwa muda malipo yote ya karo kupitia eCitizen. Mengi katika ukurasa wa pili. Kwingineko, washukiwa wa mkasa wa gesi kukaa seli siku 21, mwendesha mashtaka ataka wazuiliwe ili wasivuruge uchunguzi kuhusu mlipuko huo. Hapo chini, Mutua adai idadi ya fisi imeongezeka. Waziri asema wanyama hao walizaana kwa wingi msimu uliopita wa kiangazi. Swala ya kushtua hayo. Pale juu, sijui kama sasa itabidi tufunzwe jinsi ya kuzungumza na fisi hawa. Pale juu, waliokufa kwa pombe sasa ni Taifa Leo sema ni 10, lakini takwimu ambazo tunazo ni 13. Watu 4 zaidi wafa baada ya kunywa pombe yenye kemikali. Masuala ya michezo, barua ya Eto'o kujiuzulu yakataliwa. Alijiuzulu siku chache baada ya Indomitable Lions kuondolewa AFCON. Na hiyo ndiyo gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Okay, let's cross the border and take a look at what's headlining regionally, and we start off with Uganda. And the main headline on the Daily Monitor in Kampala this morning reads this way: the 7 deadly causes of cancer. As they commemorate the World Cancer Month, they've sought expert views on the leading causes of cancer in Uganda and what measures one can take to minimize the risk of contracting the deadly disease. It's a special report on pages 2 and 39 of the Daily Monitor, and listed some things like unhealthy diet and alcohol consumption on the front page. Daily Monitor also has a very interesting photo on the front page. It appears there's some sort of exodus in the Congo, and they dub it the Congo unrest. Hundreds flee eastern DRC as M23 government forces clash. I guess that's the reason why we've been seeing President Uhuru Kenyatta, the EAC peace envoy in the region, in Uganda. It has to do with a lot of what's happening in the DRC. That's the big headline on the Daily Monitor. The other Ugandan paper we have is the New Vision. The main headline: what MK movement's rebranding means. And it says cause of ministers MPs attend launch of Patriotic League of Uganda. And those are the big stories in Uganda today.
Right. Tuangazie gazeti la The Citizen in Tanzania. Indian billionaire expands Dar port interest with TICTs. And the Indian firm Adani International Port Holdings Pte Limited, owned by billionaire Gautam Adani, is expanding its business interests in the Dar es Salaam port by acquiring Tanzania International Container Terminal Services Limited, that is TICTS, through a subsidiary. Elsewhere, why Tanzania should invest in women-led businesses. At the very top scroll, the red eye continues to make big news in this country. 7 people blind in Zanzibar after using local red eyes remedies. That is The Citizen for you this morning. Kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi, siri wizi wa transformer za TANESCO. Na TANESCO wasema kuwa mpango mzima transformer hizo zinavyoibiwa watajwa watumishi wa TANESCO, REA na makandarasi miradi ya umeme waguzwa. Daktari Biteko atangaza kiama kwa wezi wafanyakazi 17 na TANESCO mbaroni kwa hujuma. Masuala ya red eye pia, mtoto aua mpenzi wa mama yake sababu ya wivu, lakini kwingineko sababu wapofuka macho kwa kutibu red eyes kienyeji. Na hiyo ndio baadhi ya vidokezo kwenye gazeti hili. Tafute gazeti la Habari Leo. Kwenye gazeti hili, Samia ajivunia uchumi imara. Hii ni gazeti la Taifa Leo.
Habari Leo.
Habari Leo. Usajili miradi ongezeka, dira ya maendeleo ya taifa mambo safi. Ashukuru washirika, wahakikishia amani, uwekezaji vitalindwa. Hivi ndio baadhi ya vidokezo kwenye gazeti hili.
Okay.
Habari mzuri huko, petroli dizeli za shuka bei huko Tanzania.
Tuvuke boda basi. Let's come back home and take a look at the cartoons. On page 14 of The Standard, Maswala Karakacha. The cartoon on The Standard today talks about the issue of debt. On one side, someone using the presidential podium says, unless we control the appetite for borrowing, we'll become slaves of our creditors. Then the same individual on the next slide says, and he's drinking from the bottle of debt, and he says, just one more. Moja tu. You know, one more for the road. That's a cartoon on page 14 of The Standard. On the Daily Nation, page 17. This one has to do with the acquittal of former Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko on allegations of graft. And on the scale of justice, on graft charges, that gentleman there who's washing himself clean says is sighing with the relief from that acquittal. Do we have Stano's take?
On Stano's take, page 10. Right, let's see. So, yes, there you have it. Seems as if it is matters party politics. This gentleman, there's an orange on that chair, and there's a snake slipping out. How venomous is it? I dealt with the Jogo, which was more venomous.
Yeah.
And the commentator says another faction emerges within Azimio.
Coalition politics there. And that's Stano's take on the Business Daily. Do stand by for a very interesting conversation later on this show. Matters relationships that Stan here has become an expert on. The apologetic husband.
The apologetic husband.
When you say sorry too many times.
Oh yes, you called and you had seen a couple of missed calls and you started saying, I'm sorry.
Okay, does it really work? You can be part of that conversation on social media pages, on X, TV47 News, and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Meanwhile, State of the Nation. After the break, we'll be having Professor Fred Ogola, governance and political analyst, in studio, Dr. Mutunga, MP Tigania West, as well as Ruth Ambogo, lawyer and governance expert in studio. Do stand by for that. You're watching Morning Cafe. State of the Nation. Big headlines this morning. Of course, the biggest talking point today has been that court decision yesterday, stopping, albeit temporarily, that move by the government to channel all payments, including for school fees, through the single pay system, 22222 pay bill. And that's the main headline on Standard. E-Citizen school fees blow for defiant Ruto. On the Daily Nation, states E-Citizen school fees blow. And even more interesting, and I said I love the headlines on, I don't necessarily love the headlines, but I think the Business Daily has the most interesting headlines today. One, half of Kenyans financially stressed as pay shrinks 25%, and the other one, hustlers to pay 3,000 rent daily for city roadside structures. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning. Professor Fred Ogola, governance and political analyst with the Linda Ugatuzi. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what you love, but...
I actually apologized for that. I do not love. You know, sometimes they say when it comes to news, newsrooms are very sadist spaces.
Yes.
So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, also with us this morning, Dr. Kanyuithia Mutunga, MP Tigania West. It's good to have you in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Gentlemen, let's start off with something else that probably you have not mentioned, but it features on the front page of the Daily Nation. And it is this survey by TIFA on the travels of cabinet secretaries. And they've been rated depending on their travels locally, the amount of travel each has done locally. That means from Nairobi to different parts of the country and back. And all, of course, Kithure Kindiki, the CS Interior, has been rated the most traveled within Kenya with 192 trips. But interestingly, the Daily Nation has mapped the regions that these cabinet secretaries have traveled most. And they say cabinet secretaries have toured 4 regions, that's Rift Valley, Coast, Eastern and Central, 4 times more than they have Nyanza, Western and Northeastern. And do you read anything from that, Professor?
Well, it is very clear that there are some areas that have been known as historically opposition stronghold, and you can see very clearly that they are not among those regions that is most traveled. Like if you go, who cares about what happens in Kisumu in this government? And you see the historical injustices that Luos have gone through. And I'm sorry to say this, because you can earmark the areas he has gone to see this where there's skirmishes, but there's Sondu, there is Migingo. And there are areas that are actually Luos are most affected. And even when they go to those places, we have seen that the government has branded those areas that they are tribal clashes, but actually they are administrative injustices to these people. So I see that there's an issue here, and I'm happy because as an economist, data doesn't lie. Because you can say anything 4 times more. What is the crisis? In Sondu, people are dying much more. And if you say, for example, you are going to Central, there is no crisis. As CS Interior, you'll see these preferences should be in area where they have the highest amount of insecurity. What is he launching in these areas? It is campaigns. And in fact, I had asked a question in the media, which actually was broadcasted here in TV47. Ask a question: how comes the Kenya Kwanza administration, officers from president, deputy president, PSS and CSS are not in office? If you want to meet them, you'll be given a diary of June. But they are on top of cars, in barazas, they are in Arambes, they are in funerals, and they are highly available in those areas. Why were these offices constructed if someone can't sit in an office and execute? So they are traveling 291 trips out of the office in 1 year. It means these people are not in office at all. Because to take a trip to, for example, to Central, if you're taking 2 days there. So if you take that, those trips takes 2 days each. So 2 times 292, that's over 380 trips. That means days out of office. We are having 360 days in a year, 365. means they were nothing, they are nowhere. So I believe this is a thing. Then look at even the issue of planting trees. You deploy choppers to fly on the air that you are planting trees. How many trees have been planted? So what I'm trying to say is that the Kenya Kwanza administration has a lot of wastefulness. And as a CS, you have provincial administration, you have county commissioners, you can command them. If you ask for the most performing governments before, you'll find that the most performing government did not travel much, but use on-the-ground troops. The provincial administration was forced to run parallel to county government. In fact, those people were saying you should disband it. Then eventually there was some kind of a truce not to disband it, but to help strengthen the system of national government. Why are we having too many travels with the double representation in the county and the provincial administration?
And the question is this a correct assessment of the workings or the performance of CSs or members of the cabinet, the amount of travel they've done locally? Because if you look at this, they may be judged. Yes, you've been traveling a lot, but why are you avoiding these areas?
I think the inclination of the analysts has been a lot more on travels. If you look at the recent reports that concerning travel outside the country, it's also depicting some of the cabinet secretaries as having traveled more than the others. And basically, I do not think they go to do their business, they go to do government business. Coming back to the local travel, if you look at CS Kinduki, it very much depends on the approach of the CS. There has been perennial problems in the Rift Valley, everybody knows that, the parts of Eastern and even Coast. There has been issues that needed attention, which have not happened. If you look at Coast Province, there has been so many issues like Shakahola, the Al-Shabaab in some of the, in Lamu, Rift Valley, of course, we know about the valley, the Sukta Valley and the issues thereby. So he has not been traveling basically to campaign, which I would like to dispute strongly because it's not a campaign. You've never heard him speaking about getting votes or anything. He has been going there to resolve problems. And the presence of a CS in a given county shows the seriousness of the issues it were. These issues have been relegated for a very, very long time, ignored for a very long time. But now we are seeing peace in regions that we probably had not hoped to see peace, are not expecting to see peace in a very long time, have not been able to see peace in a very long time, especially in the Rift Valley. Now, when you look at the travels to Northeastern, it very much depends on the issue that there is. These areas of concentration, and I want to zero down on two CSs, Kidero Kindiki and Nakumincha. Kidero Kindiki has gone to Northeastern to basically see how we can organize ourselves against the insurgencies from outside, from Somalia. And we don't have internal conflict in that area. Where we have internal conflict, the insurgencies are so many, the incidences of occurrence, the rate of occurrence of some of these incidences is very high, and therefore there is need for scrutiny, there is need for serious concern. Now, when you look at CS Nakumincha, we have, this is the only ministry that has had 4 legislations passed within a very short time. And there was need for serious public participation in some of the areas so that at least people can get to understand. We have the universal health care program, which has had 4 legislations. So our travel internally basically could increase because of such interactions. Okay. I'm not trying to say that there is no need for public participation in Western Kenya and Nyanza, but the need for the public participation has been happening in some of those areas.
You raised that issue about Sondu Miriu
when you look at some of the, when you look at Migingo canned many years ago. Migingo, yes, has not been fully resolved, but Migingo cannot be blamed on this government. Right now, how many deaths are we having as a result of Migingo?
What about
how many
Sondu
deaths?
Miriu?
Well, we can have a few issues on Sondu Miriu. Sondu Miriu is a natural occurrence. It's not a conflict instigated by the people. So we need to...
No. I think, Fred, I have set up a petition to East African Court of Justice to resolve the Sondu issue. The case now in Arusha is given a case number. It's being followed. I was in Migingo. I was in Sondu. And I met the teacher who was cut and left for death. I interviewed him plus the family and the neighbors, and they told me that this is a very historical thing, and the message being sent was that Kericho should extend into Luo Nyanza. I'm not saying that's correct, but that's what they feel, isn't it? Because perception is reality. When that's their perception, I think the government needs to go there in quickness and address it. But fortunately, I've taken the petition to East African Court of Justice. Attorney General is a respondent in that case. You also may find Minister of Interior is a respondent in that case. The Minister of Interior was quoted saying in Sondu that the security officials are biased in dealing with the process during Mandamano because they allowed the people who are more supporters of government to just injure the people who are seen to be on the side of opposition, and it was a serious bias. And he said it, those clips, you can find them, I'm sure in TV47 they are there. When he visited there, you can look at what he said. He acknowledged that the security officials are biased. And the Sondu issue is a 1991 issue. It is not something that is coming now. So I would not blame it only on President William Ruto's administration, but because that area has been opposition stronghold for years, because we're being told siasa mbaya ni maisha mbaya. Siasa mbaya simply means being against the government. It does not mean that you're doing anything wrong. The fact that Luos have taken a stance and the Luo nation sees that their biggest enemy is the state, because they have had historical injustices done by the state. And it's not a tribal clash. I went there, the Kisis, the Koreas, the Nandis, the Kipsigis, the Luos, they want to be together. But this is administration that is furthering these things for interest. They told me. Because when you come here to Nairobi, see, in a plot where you say there are Luos, there are Kisis, there are what, why are you not fighting in the plot? Mm-hmm. Why should you fight there? Kenyans do not have any tribal issues with them. But if you look at some of these boundary issues, that's why in the petition, I have asked for His Majesty the King to give us the original map that the colonial master has left here, because it's a boundary fight. It's not a tribal clash. Mm-hmm. When people are fighting boundaries, even a brother and a brother can cut each other. It's not a tribal clash. So let us not make it tribal. Mm-hmm. Let us just say it's a boundary issue that need to be resolved, and I'm sure this will be resolved. So I also want to just weigh in on this travel. There's some information that we don't have here, so that we can fully be able to interpret this information. So maybe the survey should look at it, and maybe Nation needs to bring it out. Because there must be a correlation between these trips and resolving the issue. For example, if you look at Rift Valley, if they have gone there for 358 trips there, are the issues that are bewildering Rift Valley in terms of insecurity reducing, mm-hmm. or we don't see the correlation between the input, the number of visits, and the issues being resolved? Because if you are concerned about that, I'm talking about the issue of Susan Nakumicha. You talk about public participation in the issue of health. Are Kenyans feeling they're engaged and they're relating better with the issue of the insurance fund? If they are completely feeling disconnected, then we don't see the correlation between
some of that trips. Information is actually within the story by the Daily Nation. Yeah. They may not have gone extensively to cover each and every aspect of that report, but at least on pages 4 and 5, they've covered some bits of it. But I'm still concerned about even the perception painted on the front page, even politically, because perceptions do matter. Western Kenya is more or less a Kenya Kwanza region, with some of quite a number of MPs from that region supporting the Kenya Kwanza administration. Politically speaking, if people from that region see that CSs are not traveling as much to their region as they're doing elsewhere, that may cause an issue.
Fred, I think we need to look at it in the context of the issues that need to be resolved. And I said that these have been internally let me say, conflicts that have come from disagreements within. If there are no disagreements in Western Kenya, and there are multiple incidents of
the sugar issue, the sugar belt, that is a problem that needs attention.
The sugar belt is an issue that has been technically handled at the subsectoral level. I've been personally involved in that, and we've done a good job. So we do not need the visits of the CS, as it were. Now, if you look at the Western Kenya, for instance, what major issue can you say conflict is that probably some of these things?
I'm sure some of these travels have to do not just with conflict, but developmental issues by the government.
I totally agree that they also could go on developmental issues, and it very much depends on what work is going on in some of these areas, and how is that work going on. Is there a problem in the project or a program? If there's a problem, then probably if it calls the attention of the CS, then that's when we'll have the CS.
By the way, Fred,
it doesn't mean that there's no development in some of those areas. If we look at Western, especially in Nyanza, if you look at especially the infrastructure development in Nyanza, if you compare the infrastructure development in Nyanza, for instance, like Eastern Kenya, they have done better than us. So we cannot say there is no uniformity in development. There's a lot more focus in development in some of those areas, because one visit, like one presidential visit in that area we witnessed last year, did so much that could have been done in several visits in some of those other areas.
Okay.
yeah, let me tell you, Fred, I think, Mheshimiwa, there's a point you're missing here. And the point you're missing here, you are looking at insecurity only to believe there's a clash.
No.
Insecurity is seen in many ways. Insecurity, do you know even why, if you analyze the one in Northeastern, we analyze why are there cattle rustling that is causing all this insecurity. It's because of poverty. The poverty levels are very high. And you look at those pastoral communities, they used to rely on cattle, and now this cannot be a mainstay. So insecurity can only, security cannot be only be measured in terms of absence of war. There's a lot of insecurity in Western Kenya. I've been to those areas. Look at all those people who are working before who are no longer at work. When those young people who are at work in the sugar factories are not at work, what are they doing? They could be taking drugs. They could be involved in things which are insecuring their future. It's not about them fighting somebody else. I think that Kenya Kwanza needs to go deep and see what are the deep issues that are affecting this country. We cannot touch things on the shallow surface. And just look at the friend. Look, just even you should have actually played a clip. When they visit, what are they saying? They are there to do propaganda. Speaking about, bottom up, to see what, that is not solving security issues. Saying the government is doing everything possible, dare me not, if you dare me, I'm going to do. Those are not solving security issues. According to me, the deep issues why we have insecurity is people feel inequality. There's lack of equity. And because of lack of inequality and equity, people feel that I am suffering because somebody else is suffering. Okay. Then these divisive things of putting people that hustler dynasty, those things are, in themselves, they are the source of insecurity. Because I remember in 2008, when we had this post-election violence, there was a perception that people rise from Kibera to go to Langata to bring down all those big apartments because people believe that their problem is the rich. And this has been the very big conversation Kenya Kwanza has had. I think there must be a deeper understanding of what is security and what is insecurity. Okay. Peace does not mean absence of war. In Coast Province, the land issues which are there are so serious. The historical injustice in Coast Province is serious. Go to Taita Taveta, the issue of resources, where, imagine, that 62% of the land that belongs to Taita Taveta people is national park. Okay. Then another percentage goes now to what you call the private ranchers, leaving just about 29% of the land to the people, and they are feeling that they're not getting anything from the land. And then allocation from the counties is around 7, maybe 5 billion shillings, and they're being told your population is small, so we cannot give you money. Okay. So I'm telling you, there must be a deeper understanding of the main issues that are affecting people.
And to be fair about the travels by members of the cabinet, the president himself has been to Western Kenya quite a number of times. Yes. And he has addressed some of these, or attempted to address some of these issues, especially in the sugar sector, publicly. So probably they should do another one that maps out the presidential travels.
I tend to think we shouldn't go to that extent, but let me say something. We are just discussing the trips, the number of trips. We are not discussing the issues that are targeted at solutions, to solving through these trips. So we don't know what they were going to do. We cannot say that they were going there to cause development, which we know is not happening at a very, very high rate at the moment because of the situation the country has been. So we should probably look at the presidential calendar and the presidential tour of the country. How many times has he been to all those areas? Where is the balance? I mean, we know clearly he has toured almost all over Kenya, and the message he takes home is very different from what probably a CS can do. But let me look at two things that my professor has brought to the fore. The Hustler versus dynasty. Are we trying to say that dynasties are in Western Kenya and in Northeastern and in Nyanza? That's the wrong approach, because the Hustler versus dynasty was a campaign slogan which basically was speaking to the Kenyans that we should not have the haves and the have-not, which has always been the issue. Let us look at how we can harness the energies of the country, I mean the resources of the country, and focus on the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid and bring them up. We should not have classes here, because we used to have very high people who could only benefit because they're there. And unless you know somebody, that's when you'll be able to benefit as a country. Okay. On the other hand, when you look at the historical injustices and issues that, like issues of land, for instance, in Coast Province and so on, it is not the Kenya Kwanza government that has brought these issues on board. It is not the Kenyan Kwanza government that now should be charged with the solution within the short time it has been in office. So let's not just bring issues because people have, because we have perceptions that the government is wrong, which is wrong.
Time now for us to take a break. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Now, the issue of insecurity. I want to look at the issue of insecurity. First one to
I'll give you an opportunity when we come after the break,
okay,
because it's scheduled and we are right on the clock. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll be right back for more on this conversation. West, and Professor Fred Ogola, governance and political analyst. And just before we enter the break, Mutunga, you wanted to add something. As we finalize this discussion on the travels by the CSS before we move to issues of the economy.
Yeah, I just wanted to very briefly touch on the issue of the poverty. We have seen data on poverty in Kenya, and we know the way it is spread across the country. And we also know exactly what needs to be done, or what the government is actually doing right now, is tackling poverty head-on. The bottom-up economic model, which I believe we should be, has been moving, is being implemented by the Kenya Kwanza government, basically looks at how do we ensure that the people at the bottom of the pyramid are resourced to be able to grow from that particular segment to move up. And that is one of the things that has basically guided some of these tours, to try and understand how the people are living, to try and understand the kind of issues that need to be resolved so that people can probably be gotten out of the trouble they're in right now.
Okay. And
Fred,
issues
before,
of economy.
just something to respond, because I want us to close this part. Let us just analyze what they're talking about, the strip. If you look at the number of days they are done, you can hear that in Central Province or in Rift Valley it takes 1 week. And Western Kenya, they go and pretend they are having a cabinet meeting there. But the other thing is the promises the president makes. And I can quote one of them. Last time the president was in Western Province, he promised sugar farmers that by December, by Christmas, he would have paid the farmers. And he has not paid them.
He sure did.
Yeah, he gave a date. He said by Christmas, he was going to pay them. And in the movie, you can actually look at that clip and watch it. I was actually waiting because I have an interest there. I never saw anybody who was paid. Farmers was not paid. They're still complaining because I know I have contacts that area. Linda Jami has contacts in all counties. And I was calling farmers and checking, have you been paid what the president promised? Are you going to have a better Christmas? I come home, we celebrate. And there was nothing like that. Then the other thing is feeding. When he came over Christmas, he sent packages of sugar and some kind of food stuff, branded UDA with his color and photo. And they were sent to Sugoi only. And tell me, any other village received foodstuffs during Christmas with the president's colors, yellow and whatever it is, with his name there, talking about the UDA government. It is only Sugoi that this sugar went to. So you can see, not even forgot about security and the rest. And lastly, broken promises. The places where we have the highest amount of broken promises are where less trips are taking place. Because even if you go to Coast Province, he talked about the issue of blue economy. They even have a minister for blue economy. I have not seen any blue economy going because the poverty levels in Coast Province is rising, yet it's a very rich county, or that region is very rich. If you go to Nyanza, he talks about roads. I can tell you last time Kenya called for roads repairs, Nyanza got to zero, while places like Rift Valley were getting something like 100 allocation to road maintenance and the rest. Those are figures you cannot ignore.
But Mutunga, I'll allow you to just respond to that as a final comment.
Especially on the payments, friend, it is very wrong for Professor to say before national TV that the government did not pay. In the last supplementary budget, we allocated, and I'm the chairman of the budget, of the Agriculture Committee. We allocated 1.7 billion to pay sugar farmers. Those that needed to be paid because the five sugar companies that needs to be listed out had failed to pay them. That money was allocated, that money was put in the budget, that money is being dispersed by the ministers as we speak. So the government does not, the president doesn't have money in his account to go and withdraw and give them to the people. We should give government time to do its work. Because if he has already started the process of payment,
he said by Christmas.
Can we say, but it was done before Christmas, it was done before we closed the parliament last time, before we went for recess.
I want us to focus on another.
So it was done in time, so that be in record. The other issue is the blue economy. My friend, blue economy is a huge investment. It's a huge potential for this country. It cannot be rolled out in a day. We need to explore our 200 nautical miles of the sea so that we may know what resources we have there. So first of all, the ministry has to be given time to explore what there is and plan for it, because the people have been stealing from our seas.
Now that we're talking about state of the nation, there are some 2 or 3 headlines I'd like to look at that will cover the issue of the economy. One is on the front page of the Business Daily. Half of Kenyans financially stressed. as pay shrinks 25%. Workers earning less than 20,000 shillings a month are the most stressed. Real wages have been eroded 25% since 2019, and they talk about shrinking pay slips. And about 48% of Kenyans, or about 9.5 million in both formal and informal employment, currently feel overwhelmed or highly stressed by their financial situation, with low-income earners and women feeling more stressed. Now, we take a look at the headline on the People Daily, and if my director can help me with this, just to have this on the front page of the People Daily on the screen. The central bank says that we should be preparing for expensive food prices. The cost of living is set to rise in the next 3 months due to high import values and exchange rate depreciation. And this is according to the governor of the central bank, Kariuki Thuge. And if you look at that story, they also talk about matters agriculture. And now that you are, and I'll start with you, you say you're the chair of the Agriculture Committee. Yes. And what we were told is that by the end of the year, because of the subsidized fertilizer, that would have boosted the harvests, and things would get better because of the booming harvests. But now we are seeing that the central bank is saying that will not happen in the next 3 months. In fact, food prices will be much higher. Already Kenyans are struggling.
I don't think so, because the price of food has significantly gone down. The staple food, what we consider as staple in Kenya is maize and probably wheat and rice and so on. But if you look at the amount of maize produced as a result of the government intervention on production subsidy, it has basically reduced the cost of production and increased the production and productivity of the maize itself. We were able to almost get enough maize to feed ourselves for the year. So when you look at other foods that probably may be imported from outside, because there's a government policy, which was not brought by the Kenya Kwanza policy government, but has been there for a very long time. We made a deliberate decision to be importing oils from outside this country. We spend over 120 billion shillings every year to import oil. This government is looking at possibilities of producing oil internally, and there are many farmers who would get into that and earn a living. So there are some foods that probably may be costly, which we are not talking about what we're producing in Kenya. Right now, if you go to eastern Kenya, where they're harvesting maize, the price of maize has gone down from 40 shillings a kilo to around 30 to 25, and soon it will be 50 shillings. So what are we talking about food prices? It depends on what Thuge is talking about. He is
a governor of Central Bank. We are not in a position to actually dispute what he says.
That is a position. It depends on what he's focusing on. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to
mostly Kenya inflation rates,
the staples have gone down. I mean, the cost of staples has gone down.
Yes, of course, the depreciation of the Kenya shilling, which may be indicative that it has been affected by the amount of imports and the inflation. But when it comes to the economy and the promises that Kenya Kwanza keep making, especially on food prices, yes, they insisted that with the subsidized fertilizer, the enhanced rainfall, things would get better. Fine, rains are not up to them. But things like fertilizer, they made sure that there was distribution. How come we're still not getting that from an economic perspective?
Yeah, let me inform my brother here that as an economist, and people normally think that I'm against anybody. Actually, my advice, if the Kenya Kwanza government can listen, then it will help them. The cost of production of unga is not only fertilizer. Actually, the fertilizer as an input contributes only 6% to the cost. Remember, there's a value chain in agriculture. First of all, you have to own the land, or at least possess that land, isn't it? That's a cost, right? Then secondly, you have to plow that land. The cost of plowing using fuel, which is very expensive, you can tell that, isn't it? Secondly, you have to harrow that land. Then you have to get seeds and then plant using labor, human labor, or any other form of labor. Then actually you have to weed it. Then you have to harvest it. Then you have to process them. Then you have to store them. Then you have to transport them. If you add all those things until unga is on the shelf, the fertilizer only contributes 6%. And fuel contributes, because you see transport, you see harvesting, even storage. When you store them somewhere, you have to bring lighting and the rest. fuel contributes more than 50% to the cost of unga. Now, if fuel is going up at a skyrocketing level, while fertilizer, which only contributes 6%, is the only one they are doing subsidizing, it has no impact whatsoever on the final produce. Even packaging, you have to package unga. No one goes to the shelf with their own sufurias and then they fetch unga from the supermarket and they go with it home. And even branding it, somebody has to print those papers and put soko ugali, dollar, all those things. So what I'm trying to say is that Kenya Kwanza needs to have a value chain approach to reducing the cost of foodstuffs rather than the propaganda on fertilizer. Because when you are increasing the fuel prices, and with the fuel prices, which has a lot of impact on the value chain, then you use that money you're collecting on fuel to maybe subsidize fertilizer, then actually you're cheating Kenya. So according to me, those prices will not go down if you don't bring the person that creates. For example, in the mood, let me give you an example. If you go to a doctor and you are sick, you have 4 illnesses. For example, you have a heart disease, you have a kidney disease, you have brain issues, isn't it? And you have fever. Does the doctor start with the fever, or he starts with the heart disease that will kill you most? If fuel is the main reason why the prices are rising, why don't Kenya Kwanza tackle the core of the cost of living, which is fuel? Okay. According to me, by tackling what is only convenient, is not solving the problem and is lack of sincerity.
And going by what the CBK governor says, because this was a promise by Kenya Kwanza, and they said within the next 6 months, we have taken enough measures, we have put in enough measures to ensure that in the next 6 months, the situation will be better. But now the same government, through the CBK governor, says even in the next 3 months, things will be getting worse.
Yendimuli, let me start by correcting some of that statistics. It's not correct. From my agronomy, and I am an authority in agriculture. First of all, there are 3 factors that determine production and productivity. 3. Number 1, quality of seed. Number 2, soil health. Number 3, water. Those 3 contribute up to 75–80% of what you will get at the end of the day. All these others do not feature. Secondly, the cost of what stresses Kenyans most is the cost of farm inputs. And farm inputs is fertilizer, is the seed, is the agrochemicals, and of course, agrochemicals in terms of pest and disease control, which contributes to cumulatively about 30%. Fertilizer alone goes up to 15% of the cost, not 6%. Now, when you come to cost of fuel, where do we need fuel? Are we transporting growing crops? We need fuel only to plow the land and maybe harrow where you are doing mechanized farming, and also transportation of the.
Are you still insisting
2 instances,
that harvest is adequate?
Listen, the cost of transport is little when it comes to the amalgamate, the entire value chain approach. Kenya does not need to be told, or the government doesn't need to be told, to start value chain approach. Value chain approach started in this country in the 1980s. That's when we started the value chain approach. So there has been so many studies. We have structured the entire value chain from pre-production to the plate, to the table. So that has been looked into through. So when you look at the components that you need to address on, the country is currently, the government currently is addressing on the issue of provision of water for supplementary irrigation, because that's why we have a problem. And then it's addressing the issue of soil health through supply of fertilizers that
the question
are correct.
Is, according to your own assessment, or according to the Kenya Kwanza assessment, the measures taken by October and November last year would have ensured that by now would be in a different kind of situation.
But in Imuli,
what went wrong?
Obviously, the cost of unga has gone down. That was the main measure of the cost of just.
They did not just talk about the cost of unga.
No, we are talking about the cost
of living and the food prices.
The cost of food. I'm addressing the cost of food right now.
You're talking about the cost of unga.
Vis-a-vis the cost of fuel. So I'm saying fuel is not a major component, as my friend is trying to put it at 60%. It's not possible.
My question is, according to the Kenya Kwanza administration, yes, they insisted that according to the measures they've taken so far, the prediction was in the next 6 months or so, which I think would lapse in March, the situation, especially in food prices, would have been remedied. But now the CBK governor says in the next 3 months, things will be...
The CBK governor is looking at very many factors. When you look at the entire economy, you look at many factors.
Are we saying he's wrong?
Factors that basically probably bring up the inflation rate. The inflation rate in Kenya is still single digit.
I think, Fred, there's something here to explain. Mheshimiwa, you are mixing things here. We're talking about cost of food. We're not talking about contribution to productivity of the food. You can have high productivity, but the cost is very high. Because you are injecting, the cost of inputs are very high, the productivity is very high, the cost of it ends up being very high. For example, a cup of tea in Switzerland is around 8 euros, isn't it? If it is 8 euros, how much is 8 euros here? For us, 8 euros you can use here to drink a whole kettle. But the cost of labor, he's ignoring cost of labor. Can you tell me if you are using, for example, a tractor, how much does it cost to cultivate per acre if you use a tractor? Tractor uses fuel. These are completely evident. Quality of soil can be very good, but if you lower the cost of fuel, then the final product will be cheaper. I think, Mheshimiwa, let's talk about supply and the prices. They are very different. And the production, the productivity can be very high, which is okay. For example, I can say I was in a place called Barkoroa, which is in Seme. Someone told me that they got more maize. This is true. They got more maize, but at what price? You can produce more maize, but they are too expensive for anyone to afford. But if you go to Brazil, for example, let's even just give an example because one understanding about sugarcane, isn't it? Brazil crushes 7 tons of sugarcane to produce 1 ton of sugar, right? In Kenya, we crush 14 tons of sugarcane to produce 1 ton of sugar. So you can have tons and tons of sugarcane in Kenya, but the contribution to sugar is very low. Okay. So let us look at that. And why are we having these challenges? You can go now to the quality of the sugar, the harvesting time when you harvest it, and then, of course, the milling of it. All those can contribute. Okay. So, Mheshimiwa, I can tell you, look, when you're even packaging sugar, you're packaging unga, isn't it? Can you package unga without electricity? If cost of electricity is very high now, where I use 1,000 shillings could give you around 60 units. Now it's give you 30-something units. Mm-hmm. So if that is the cost of electricity, are you not seeing that
other
packaging
factors beyond fertilizer?
Yes. So there are, and I can tell you there are bigger electricity cost, fuel cost, together cost of energy contributes 62% and above to the cost of unga. And that's why, if I am wrong, why is sugar cane not going down? Okay. If I am wrong and they are right, how comes I'm wrong and the cost of living is not going down? Okay. They are right and the cost of living is going up. It is impossible that you can be wrong.
Allow me to introduce.
It's impossible that I can be wrong, and you are right, and you are not solving the problem.
Another panelist has joined us, Ruth Mbogo, lawyer and governance expert. It's good that you made it to studio. Karibu sana. You found us right in the middle of this debate on the cost of living, because headline on the People Daily today, the front page reads that the CBK governor says that the cost of food prices is set to go up. The cost of living will go up because food prices are set to go up in the next 3 months. And we're looking at the promises that Kenya Kwanza made last year. And they were told that within 6 months, and I think it was sometime in October, that in the next 6 months, because of the measures the government had already taken and continues to take, that this situation would have been remedied. If we juxtapose that with the headline of the Business Daily, which says that half of Kenyans are financially stressed as pay shrinks by 25%. Clearly, times are getting harder for Kenyans, and this is going negative, or contrary to the promise that Kenya Kwanza made, that yes, in about 6 months' time, things will be better.
Well, I was listening to Mheshimiwa while I was coming, and I heard him, passionately defending the government and saying that things are working. But clearly, a government institution is coming out to tell you that times are going to be tough in the next 3 months. And I think when you reduce the cost of living to the price of unga, you actually laugh in the face of Kenyans who are struggling without necessarily providing proper solutions for them. Because food is not just reduced to unga. Remember, on your menu for breakfast, you don't eat ugali, and it is not all the times that you eat ugali, So when you reduce the entire cost of living to the price of unga going down, and going down not just for a sustained period of time, but for a short period of time to make Kenyans feel as if you're working, and then after the period of time, the excitement goes down, the prices of unga go back to the normal price that they were. So food comprises of many things. Food comprises of milk, food comprises of sugar, food comprises of the cost of mboga, food comprises of so many, we eat a lot of, a variety of food. So when you're told that the cost of key food items is going to go up, expect that the cost of milk is going to go up, expect that the cost of mboga is going to go up, and the cost of sugar is going to go up. And it is an unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in, because this is a government that during campaigns, their premise for why they won was that they were going to make life easy for mwananchi. So I think that, you know, what we need to do, or what government needs to do right now, is come up with interventions to make sure that the situation is remedied, because life is already difficult for Kenyans right now. Affording even just basic fare to work. A lot of Kenyans right now are walking to work, you know. Many Kenyans have downed their cars and they're saying, you know what, I'd rather use public transport to get to work. And even those who cannot afford, forget about those who have private means to get to work. Even those who could afford matatus to go to work no longer can afford the same because of the prices of fuel going up. So it is just, I mean, it is one thing to say that fertilizer has been provided and therefore there will be a bumper harvest in maize, therefore the prices of food will go down, forgetting that food comprises of so many other types of food that if the prices go up, then, you know, Kenyans are going to suffer. And as you have mentioned, that the income that Kenyans are earning is now reduced by about 25%. So meaning, initially, remember even before the income was reduced by 25%, Kenyans were finding it hard to afford life in general, you know, to afford food in general. So now you have less disposable income to spend on food. So how are people going to survive? Are we going to find ourselves in a situation where people are only going to survive on one meal a day? And you know, as an adult, that is something that you can comfortably do. What about children, you know? Can they survive on one meal a day?
Dr. Mutunga?
Yeah, thank you very much, friend. I get surprised when you hear certain sentiments, and I want to correct them. First of all, we are talking about the cost of living in its entirety. And we are discussing the issue of the cost of food. And we are saying that the government should do something. What surprises me most is that we don't seem to be seeing what the government is doing here. And if the enlightened Kenyans cannot see what the government is doing, we are unlearning the Kenyans. We are miseducating the Kenyans. First of all, I said clearly, if you have to bring down the cost of food, you must intervene in a way that you can increase productivity and production. That's how you can do it. That's the only way. You cannot tell the government to look for other ways. Which other ways? Why don't you come with concrete proposals from this platform, concrete proposals that the government can do in order to reduce the cost of food, other than producing the food?
The question then,
secondly, let me come.
Are you able to give timelines?
There's an issue. No,
can you give timelines? Say if we boost production, then this will remedy the situation in about a year or 2 years.
If you boost production, you increase productivity, you challenge the crop, then you produce at lower cost. If you produce at lower cost, then you land the food on the table at a lower cost. The transportation is not really the issue here. People will eat.
My question is about the kind of timelines, the timelines that Kenya Kwanza has been giving Kenyans, and the kind of timelines that even the CBK governor is saying.
It takes time. Look at the economy that Kenya Kwanza inherited. Kenya Kwanza inherited a completely dilapidated economy that had nothing. They declared what we have found so much in the past.
The food prices now are being affected by the previous administration.
There are so many things that have got to be done for us to get back to, to get to the low cost of living. First of all, we have to be able to enable the Kenyans to produce their own food sufficiently. We are looking at an economy where individuals, people.
Let me, Dr. Mutunga, I'll allow you more time to explain the connection between the last administration and the current food prices.
Now, what I'm trying to say is that the last administration left the country in a very bad state, and everybody knows that. It has to be fixed. And there are ways of, and then the last administration aimed a lot more on subsidization of consumption. This administration is saying it is not sustainable to keep on subsidizing consumption. Let us subsidize production so that Kenyans can afford. And that's so that the food can be cheap. And that is the way to go in most of the economies. Let me go back to where we are saying the cost of fuel, the cost of energy. Now, how many of Kenyans who produce food, or rather what proportion of food is produced, is 100% mechanized in this country? that you may say now the cost of fuel is such a significant contribution. It is not such a major proportion because 80% of the Kenyans of the food is produced by the smallholders in Kenya.
For subsistence use only.
Not for subsistence. They do it for purposes of even getting money to pay for the fees of their children. But they end up eating that food. When they have not produced the food, the country has to buy food from outside. That's why we suffer. So, if they are enabled to produce their food, first of all, and then to get them balanced to the market, that will reduce the cost of food for even those other people. So this is not a super economy that you can basically say, okay, so much is going to mechanization. How much of it is going to...
I'm very concerned with the statements. In fact, let me tell you what. For me, the biggest problem I have is that the people who should make the right decisions, when you hear how they argue, you lose hope.
Yeah.
You lose hope because, Mheshimiwa, when my grandmother in Uganda listens to you, he doesn't see hope because it looks like you have not even appreciated
Don't
the
lie to
problem.
your grandmother so that you can give her false hope.
No, let's be honest. Let's be honest. I'm starting from there. When you have not even appreciated the magnitude of the problem, then we cannot even start looking for a solution from you. And let's say, if you don't know your problem, you don't know the solution. The problem we are having here is not the previous administration. Agricultural production has a cycle. You cannot blame the previous farmer for a harvest of a year later. And the previous administration, William Ruto was in that administration.
Yeah.
And if he was not in the administration, let him return all the salaries he earned in that administration because he was in that administration. And the present administration here means Uhuru Kenyatta. Then secondly, I've heard this misnomer that the Uhuru government left nothing in the coffers. I want to tell you, Mheshimiwa, you are an educated person. I know the truth. Government does not operate a current account or savings account to give you account balance. If that is the case, why didn't Uhuru Kenyatta give Ruto a check for Kenya? This is the check that is for Kenyan account. And if, Mheshimiwa, there's an account where you're supposed to get these billions of shillings that were remaining during Uhuru Kenyatta, tell me even now, which is the bank and the branch where Kenyan's money is sitting? Kenyan money is this. Money is collected. It's taken to consolidated fund and then is used. You cannot tell me how much money have you left. The only thing I know is that around $58 billion were put in by Uhuru Kenyatta in an account, which the president acknowledged, to stabilize the Kenya shilling. And William Ruto said he withdrew that money. No, he closed the account. We are asking, when he closed that account, where did he take that money? Because you can't close an account and leave money inside it. So the misnomer that money was left, the money was left, there was nothing in the account. The Kenya Kwanza was not given any check or bank account, or there was no signatories being changed in the bank. So let us put that aside. And now, when you start telling us about the issue of that there is no one who is producing food without energy. I come from a village, remote village in Uganda. Can you move maize from the farm, then chew them and convert them into unga, then cook ugali? It must go to a posho mill. And when somebody of your stature, with all respect, you are called honorable, telling us that there is no cost of energy to production, I don't get it. How does seeds reach my village? No. The input, seeds.
We'll allow you to respond.
Seeds, fertilizer, reaching my village, when they are flying on air or they go through the river, we have rivers here. You put them in the river, they flow down, people pick them, no energy used. When you want to go and transport them, when you want to store them, and even when they are being packaged, when you want to carry them, we use border borders now for mailing maize in the villages. They cost money. So according to me, the biggest contributor is this one. And if you talk about labor, the wage bill of government, let me just compare. They say that 75% of the Kenyan budget goes into recurrent expenditure, which mostly also is about salaries. Now, do you want to tell me in farming no one is paid a salary? So when I talk about cost of labor, those who are digging, you're telling me those who are digging in the village, they dig for free because they're in the village. If you hire people to dig for your farm to cultivate, you have to pay them. That is energy, or human energy is not energy. And now people charge based on how the cost of living is. So as far as I'm concerned, Kenya Kwanza needs to appreciate the deep issues we are in.
Let's allow Dr.
And
Mutuga
then
to respond.
eventually, let me give you a solution. The solution is here. And Fred, look at
Prof, let's allow Mutuga to respond. Then we come
he
back.
has asked for a solution. I give him just shortly 1 minute.
Because you've challenged his statement, I think it's only right to give him.
No, let me give he said he wanted the solution, isn't it? You look at this travel. Is it necessary? No. Cut on government expenditure. I gave example that to transport Kenyan government, the Ruto's presidency government, it costs us 98.6 billion shillings a year because Gachagua has 30 cars, Musalia has 15, all the CS has 7 each, the PSS have 5 each. In total, because of the issue of maintenance, 300,000 shillings in total Kenya per month. Fuel is 150 liters per day. If you calculate that, you get 98.6 billion shillings per year, which is not necessary. Cut the unnecessary thing, lower the taxes, you'll get the economy back, but taxing people to prosperity will never work. You're being told and don't listen.
Idimuli, I was speaking on proportions because you are exaggerating the proportion that goes to fuel or to energy. Because if you look at the entire continuum of the value chain, how much is spent on energy, how much is spent on petrol, especially on fuel? That's exactly what I was talking about. It is not 60%. It is about between 15 and 20%. So if it is between 15 and 20%, why shouldn't we cheat Kenyans that the things are so difficult because of the cost of fuel? Actually, is it only Kenya that fuel is expensive? Travel to any other country, you find the cost of fuel is the same. So what are we talking about here? This Kenya is not living in isolation. It's not an island. Kenya is living within the international community, and we share everything.
Okay.
Ndimuli, I was actually about, before he responded, I wanted to come in and talk about the cost of fuel and the impact on the prices of food. Remember, as I mentioned, that the key food items that we are talking about are not just reduced to unga, so that we talk about the production and the contribution of fuel in production of unga and things like that. Remember that most food, before most food is accessed in remote areas of the country, the food needs to be transported. And through what means is the transport done? It is done through, I believe, cars that require fuel. And when the costing of food, if the cost of fuel is up, then by the time you're transporting this food and getting it to the destinations that it needs to get to, then you must factor in the cost of fuel. And therefore, that means that if it is high, then you will factor in the cost of fuel and increase the prices of food items. So as I mentioned, food items include, cooking oil that needs to be transported from point A to point B before it is accessed by people from the different parts of the country. So we cannot downplay the role of the cost of fuel in the increase of the prices of food, in the country.
Okay. We cannot downplay, and I want to buy that statistic. 100% you cannot downplay, but you cannot say it is 60%. It is very wrong to lie to Kenyans that it cost of fuel is 60%.
We also can't counter what
Excuse me, let me get back to you to a certain point that she said, which I want to amplify. She said that today you may not be able to drive your car to work. You may have to maybe combine with another person or join another person. And then said some people are walking. She did say some people are cycling. Indimuli, go to developed countries. They majorly use public transport. Kenya, we have stuck to our own vehicles. One person, one big car. Secondly, they do not cycle. I saw a minister for finance cycling.
That is what we should adopt.
Why can't we be realistic? Why should we be imagining that our government should get money from somewhere and bring down the cost of living? Where do we get that from?
The question becomes,
do we have the infrastructure for that? So should we kill the government then?
No. In those countries that is mentioned, in those countries that is mentioned, people are cycling. There are roads that are properly demarcated where people can cycle. Today, if you attempt to cycle on these roads of Nairobi, you will die the next minute.
The headline on the People
But then
Daily,
you can get into public
on the
transport.
Front page of the People
Why don't
Daily
we consider
today
public transport as an option?
Central Bank of Kenya governor says that food prices, the cost of living will go up because food prices are set to go up in the next 3 months. That is a CBK governor, Kariuki Thuge. I want us to look at this other headline. And it has to do with, because it's also on the front page of the Daily Nation and the front page of the Standard. E-Citizen school fees blow for defiant Ruto. Judge slams the brakes on payment of school fees through e-citizen pay bill number, dealing the president's plan to collapse over 3,000 government pay channels into a single digital system a blow, even as the head of state vows, while in Japan, that his program is unstoppable. States e-citizen school fees blow. And now, we may not necessarily discuss the issue before court because the issue has been challenged in court, and we're not talking about the merits or the demerits of that. But this policy has raised concern among parents and teachers alike. And I want just to get your feeling about this mode of approach through the central payment system for all government services. Because especially for parents, they're saying, some of us pay school fees in kind. And now you're telling us to pay school fees directly to a centralized number. What happens to some of us who do not have cash or mobile payment methods?
Yeah, so Fred, you know, when actually I have a petition, and actually the doctor, the good doctor from Nakuru has done a fantastic job. My petition was going to go to court with the same thing, but we are still taking it to court today because there's something we are adding on top of what he has done. And I'm going to ask maybe that they are going to consolidate it to listen together so that we can save judicial time. When I look back why I was preparing this petition, I look back why I went to school. I went to a school in Ugenya, a place called Alak Primary School, and my mother used to prepare changa. So because my mother used to prepare changa, the teachers used to come to drink changa at our home. So that's the reason why they could not chase me for school fees, because if they chase me for school fees, they will have nowhere to drink. So in that kind of setting, e-citizens would have not helped me to proceed with my school. And some parents pay school fees through firewood. Some of them take a cow, or some of them do some work in school. So I think that Kenya Kwanza administration, mostly the president, is blind to what happens to Kenyans in normal. They said they were hustlers, but actually they didn't know what the hustler problem is. If Kenya Kwanza want to understand how to help Kenyans, let them think like a slum dweller. When you are in a slum, for example, in Kibera, where I grew up, how are we solving our issues? For example, want to listen to a radio? Somebody will buy a radio, others will buy batteries, and you buy one, I buy one. So the owner with the radio goes to the radio, somebody goes with another battery. So there's a way how the economy worked in these low-income settlements of the hustler. So the hustler government here was a tagline, but it was actually they never really knew. If you look at the president, the deputy president, look at Musalia Mudavadi, look at their net worth. The net worth of this whole government shows they are not. So they don't understand Kenyans' problem. But let me just explain why the issue is serious. And there's a press statement I gave that appeared here in TV47 about the challenge about e-citizen. I say that it has become a government or President William Ruto's legacy project because it is money they make through the e-citizen that matters, not how much convenience it gives to Kenyans, or at least it makes Kenyans access government services. Okay. Why should you make a government services so inconvenient so that they pay convenient fees? That's the question. You pay for your passport. As I speak here, even my own daughter, who applied for her passport in June last year, has not found it. Yet you pay the convenience fee to e-citizen. Where does that money go? Okay. Does it go to... So there are many questions about it. Then collapsing all of them. Remember, before William Ruto became president, there were less than 1,900 e-government services in the system. Now they have hit 17,000 e-government services in the e-citizen. There's a challenge of concentration risk because should e-citizen collapse or anything happens to it, it could be so serious. I remember the time when M-Pesa was not working, even Uber people could not do business because for you to take Uber, how will you pay them and there's nobody with cash? So I'm seeing that digitization, in as much as it's good, it has also got a lot of challenges. Then secondly, you saw that there was a scandal that money got lost from the e-citizen that cannot be accounted for. Yeah. And if those things are happening, is a challenge. Lastly, the procurement process of PesaFlow, all these other entities that were there, why were they not competitive bid for? I saw this announcement that came from Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, but we don't know how those selections were done. And last but not least, and for me this is my best point, I think the Kenya Kwanza government want to take us to dictatorship using e-citizen. Why am I trying to say so? I'm trying to say so because when somebody has put all money in a pay bill number 22222, For you to get back your money, you have to go again to parliament, just like MPs go to State House and saying, tunatafuta maendeleo. Governors come to tunatafuta maendeleo because this is the only person with a paycheck. So even schools will be going there to look for how they can kneel before the president. If you don't behave well, there's no disbursement. If you work with the government, you get disbursement.
Okay.
I think this is a control. And last but not least,
Let's give Bwana Mutunga an opportunity.
This is an
because
important point.
He's alone on this panel.
This money is being used to emasculate parliament. That's why we have representative officials elected in parliament who can pass a draconian bill. They can debate a bill in 2 hours, 300 MPs. The money is being used to emasculate parliament. And this one, I have internal information. And I think, Mheshimiwa, that's why you see
Dr. Mutunga,
they are not representing the interests
there seems to be a serious
that's a very serious
trust
allegation.
deficit in our government's ability to handle this money. Case in point, when it comes to education, the government is already struggling. And there have been complaints about the release of money to schools in terms of capitation per child. Now, when the government takes all the other monies that the schools are receiving directly, and then the schools still have to go through the government to access that money, don't you think it will further worsen the situation?
I would be very careful to actually imagine without proof, without any evidence, that money is going to be used for this or that other purpose. For instance, what he has said last, which is really derogatory, that Parliament is going to be influenced by this money. I've been in Parliament for the last 7 years. This is my 7th year, and I've never seen that money influencing any debate. We have been having bills passed because we have a Kenya Kwanza plan, which needs legislative support, policy and legislative support to be able to move. So bills come and bills are debated and they pass because that is the role of Parliament. Legislation is the role of Parliament. We don't do it because we want to improvise the Kenyan or to stretch the Kenyan further. Secondly, when it comes to disbursement, we have seen government disbursing money without any problem. We have not seen any single entity denying money because they have not been aligned to any they have not appeared to be supporting
But
government.
there have been complaints of delays.
Delays are there because there is scarcity. In the event of scarcity, choices are made, and choices have got to rely on priorities. What is priority at any one given time? If there isn't enough to disperse, what
wouldn't
would you do?
this worsen those delays? That challenge of, because now it's a centralized system. There already has challenges in delays in disbursement.
This is a different, this is a handling
It is that explanation.
It's not a resourcing issue, it's a handling issue, it's a management issue. So management has not been a problem as long as there are resources. We have known that. And at the end of every financial year, every voted coin is released to the institution. So there has never been any transfer or other carryover of balances from the previous year. So I think there is not, we don't want to scare ends of schools here and tell them that this particular function has been taken so that you can be coerced to align. Which schools are against the government? Like which one? Which heads of schools are against the government?
Head teachers have already complained.
Let me tell you. Let me say this.
Sons.
You know, we have a political mind in this country which is oppositionist. The greater majority of Kenyans will want to fight the government because the situation is difficult. Instead of appreciating the fact that it's difficult and we're living a difficult time and then we need to get out of this as a nation, it's like we want to tear this country together. Because some of the sentiments are too lethal to try and profess. Are we not seeing the other side of the coin, where people have been cheating, the heads of schools have been having different ways of collecting money, and then this money is not necessarily going to any development venture. This money is not accounted for. Are we not seeing a point of accountability? Can we open our eyes a little bit further than just see the negative aspect of this?
Okay.
I think there's a lot of, maybe as the court pronounces itself, we can say, okay, there has not been public participation and so on, but are there provisions, is there a policy guideline which can help us to manage it? It's a management issue.
Ruth, there are those who argue, and this is the other side of the thinking, as when Dr. Mutunga suggests, that consolidating all the funds for education, and there's been that argument that even the CDF process of bursaries is not probably the best way, that probably if we consolidate all the monies in one pot and then fund education across the country, it would work. Probably this is just one of the ways of consolidating this fund for education. Don't you think that probably it's something that we can, if we open our minds to, it could actually resolve some of the issues we have?
If you look at it in terms of, if you give an example of CDF, then it would make, it would make reasonable sense that indeed it could actually be a way to cure some of the problems that we are facing as a country, especially within the education sector. However, for me, my biggest concern with these new pronouncements that the government keeps making is the removal of Mwananchi's opinion about the whatever particular pronouncements they come up with and policies that they come up with. Remember that our new constitution that we gave to ourselves, one of the provisions that the new constitution came up with was public participation, the need for public participation before anything significant that affects the lives of Mwananchi is introduced to the public. And this is one of those instances where Mwananchi's lives is pretty much going to be disrupted. And as we have mentioned, the examples of how this will be, lives of Mwananchi will be disrupted is the people who pay school fees in kind, the people who use different, methods of paying school fees. And it's not just, those people, because they are not the majority. The majority of the ways in which, the major way of paying school fees is through cash. Most parents pay school fees through cash. But again, even though they still pay school fees through cash, there is still need for them to be consulted, Mwananchi to be consulted as to what do we think about this. And it's not just consultation in terms of what do we think about this, but then also have proposals, take the proposals of the Mwananchi. What exactly, what other ways can we make this better? So I think that for me, for as long as the Kenya Kwanza administration keeps bypassing the constitution and keeps bypassing the laws that have been put in place and the procedures that have been put in place for how things should be done, they will continue facing and encountering the court that will continue dismissing anything that they come up with, even though it might sound like it is going to be beneficial to the Mwananchi.
Okay.
But then again, if you look at it from the other angle and the other aspect, this e-citizen thing is not just limited to payment of school fees. We've heard about payment of meals via e-citizen, and universities, public university students are already complaining that the cost of food is already in itself, it is expensive depending on where you want to look at it from, and then you have an additional 50 shillings service charge that they have to encounter while paying the meals via the e-citizen platform. So have the students been consulted about this? What is their opinion on this? How does this affect the students? So I think that this government, once again, needs to go back to the drawing board. They need to have them within their coffers, proper advisors who can advise them on before they take up, serious proposals and propositions such as this.
Okay, Prof, looking at the president's justification of this, and he was speaking in Japan, it features on the front page, and he says, "You may have heard the latest about school fees in Kenya. Some of the money paid by parents in boarding schools, we are insisting that it be paid through e-citizen. The cash payment system is slippery and often an avenue for corruption." To some extent, there's some truth to this, that some head teachers have been doing some, well, let me call them shadowy business with the payment of school fees. And we've talked about even some fees that are not legal, according to the ministry's description. Probably this method could be one of the remedies to that issue.
Fred, there's something very interesting that I think that should be even more focused than what you're saying. Whatever the president is trying to, his intentions, he only knows that himself, because you cannot read a man's intention. Only God can, and I can't claim to be God. But the point we're trying to bring here across is the serious thing he's saying, the court has pronounced itself, and he is in contempt of court to say it's unstoppable. That's the main point here. Even if there are slippery ways there's nowhere we can say everybody's clean. Corruption is in some of our families.
Don't you think that a single payment system could actually help get rid of that?
Yes, but even if that is the solution, follow the law. Because let me tell you what, in the Muli, I belong to a family. I'm sure you do as well, and even Mheshimiwa and Ruth. If your father pronounces, carries the constitution of the family and says this is the family constitution, then every day he breaks it and says I'm unstoppable against it. What should children do? Because the president is our father. And I would say still I respect him as our president, as the figure of the president that is respected. The president is respected, all of us. I obey the Constitution of Kenya, and I have to acknowledge him as president. Whether you are in Azimio or not, that's your president. Even if I travel out of the country, they say the president of Kenya, using my passport, ask you to accord Fred Ogola any support when he's traveling. I acknowledge him, because in my documents, I acknowledge him as my head of state. But then, is he a good example to the country? And then another question I can ask you, in the Muli, if you have a wallet now, and we are sitting here, the president is here, and your head teacher is seated there, and then I tell you, you are going out for a short call, whom will you give your wallet? Between the head teachers and Kenya Kwanza government, whom can you trust more with your wallet? So if they are saying teachers have been corrupt, the corruption in Kenya is highest in the executive. Okay. This is the truth. Okay. And I give numbers. According to EACC record, the most corrupt ministry is internal security, followed by health.
Okay. Because of
education is much lower, yet education is the highest spender. Okay. So the fact that there's more corruption in the internal security, in the health ministry, shows that the Kenya Kwanza government is more corrupt. So I don't even care whether they collect that money, because that money may still go to corruption. Because let's go to the facts here.
Because of time,
numbers,
we only have like 4 minutes only.
Yes, I'm going to be done in 1 minute. If you look at the amount of money Kenya Kwanza has collected, there is no development project ongoing. There are around 3.6 trillion shillings in terms of collection, 2.4 trillion shillings in terms of debt. If you add that together, that is 6 trillion, and nothing is going on. The economy is very bad. Why is this money? If we cannot trust them with that amount of money they collect directly and put development on the table, how can we collect with the school fees for children, parents who are suffering that they are collecting and that we won't see it again? Okay. This is a way to consolidate power and money.
Okay. Dr. Mutunga, final comment.
Thank you very much, Indimuli. Now, I just want to revisit the issue of collection and the issue of corruption. When you try to compare the Ministry of Education with the Ministry of Interior and Health, I think we need to be aware of the populations involved, who actually are the main actors here. If you look at Interior, there are just a few people. If you look at Health, there are just a few practitioners. But here we are talking about literally every family in this country. And that is where we need to contain the losses or contain the pressure on the Kenyans. And that is why we need to rationalize, because you realize that, of course, most of us here are children in school, and fees is changing every day. When the president pronounces himself against any increment on the fees, the heads of schools increase fees anyway, and they hide it under so many other sub-heads, and this is what needs to come out. And once you call for declaration, it will not come out. That's why if you have one system of payment, then you'll be able to notice this is a prescribed fee, and this is another amount which is being paid by parents, which is actually not supposed to be there. So I find the government being fair to the Kenyans to come up with some of these means to try and reduce the cost. Okay. Now, there's one point that I want to correct before we close. He said, Professor said that the cost, that extravagance in government offices needs to be reduced. I am not an advocate of extravagance. But when you say that a CS has 7 cars that are being fueled by the government and so on, the Musali has 15, and I think we need to be clear and correct on some of these issues. I know several CSs, I've not seen more than 3. And I'm not saying that I've visited the statistics, the distribution system and so on. I have not seen that. Maximum I've seen is 3, not 7. So let's not cheat Kenyans.
Those are official, allocated, and I get real information.
Well, I think for
those are other staff members.
For me, my biggest concern with this government is the fact that they actually fear the opinion of the people. And when you fear the opinion of the people, then that pretty much translates to the fact that most of the things that you want to pass or implement, you know that would not be acceptable to the people, and therefore, to some extent, are not even legal if you look at it in terms of the law. So I think that, once again, as I have mentioned, the government needs to reconsider the people that they have on their payroll as advisors, because if they did, then a lot of these cases that they have, they would not be facing the same. If they did, then the cost of living as it is right now would not be where it is right now. We would not be where we are as a country if the government reconsidered, having different advisors, because, again, as I have mentioned, we have government losing so many cases, and the question I would want to ask is, for instance, right now, why is the Attorney General drawing a salary when the government seems to be losing so many cases, Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ruth Ambogo, a lawyer and governance expert, Dr. Kanyuithia Mutunga, MP Tigania West, and Professor Fred Ogola, governance and political analyst with the Linda Ugatuzi group. Thank you so much, our panelists this morning, helping us understand the headlines. Let's go straight to the editorial comment. Now, this week, we've seen that 13 people have died and many others suffered several health consequences after consuming illicit alcohol in Kirinyaga. A grim reminder of the persistent challenge posed by the illegal business, particularly in the Mount Kenya region. This incident underscores significant challenges and gaps in the enforcement and containment of illicit alcohol, raising questions about the effectiveness of renewed and existing measures to combat the menace. Now, despite vocal directives from top leadership of this country urging the police and provincial administrations to take action, it appears that these calls have fallen on deaf ears. The complicity of corrupt law enforcement officials who reportedly accept bribes from illicit brewers further worsens the problem, undermining efforts to curb the illicit alcohol trade. Recent surveys by the National Authority for the Campaign Against Drug Abuse, NACADA, have revealed a disturbing trend where many young men, including children as young as 10 years old, have fallen victim of the illegal trade. Now, there is urgent need for a coordinated national strategy to combat illicit alcohol and drug trade, coupled with stringent penalties for offenders. It is distressing that in contemporary society, lives continue to be lost due to the callous actions of individuals profiting from the sale of dangerous substances.